So this topic of Silicon Valley and Bitcoin, I think, there's a question that we're often discussing kind of offline, and I think is a popular topic among Bitcoiners, which is why doesn't Silicon Valley understand Bitcoin? But what are they missing? How do we convince them? And I kind of sort of challenge the question to just kind of open it up. Is Silicon Valley missing Bitcoin, or should a new type of thing that's not so Silicon Valley be the place where the Bitcoin building emerges? Just sort of open that up as a question.
I like that question. Should we set some context, maybe with a little bit of history, like in 20?
Yeah, sure.
And then I think we can answer your question better. But like the first wave of Silicon Valley hype and Bitcoin, I think, was in the 2013 era. Because like pre-2013, it was a very small set of OGs who discovered Bitcoin and bought some or transacted with it, ran a node, mined.
And there were a lot of them in that era. It wasn't like this covert thing. It was basically every venture firm knew about it and was buying Bitcoin.
But like in the 2010 to 12 era, I think it was more like a global phenomenon within a niche group of people.
Drug dealers and
there was definitely like Wences got a lot of people. One of the funders of this space, Wences Casares, got a lot of people in Silicon Valley. Taught them about Bitcoin. I was at Google at the time, as was Matt. I think you maybe left, but you had already left, David. But and it was definitely going through Google as well. But like the 2013 era, that's when VCs, I think their conception, entrepreneurs and VCs were trying to like make payments happen. But I think they viewed it as more like, oh, this is going to replace PayPal or Visa. But I get the sense that Silicon Valley at the time thought it was like a payment layer replacement and not this revolutionary new money that's like replacing the dollar. Which if you view Bitcoin in that lens, you realize it doesn't happen overnight. Like it's not like you just build a Silicon Valley startup and that happens. You have to like shake up institutions, and you really since it's not fiat, not declared by a government, it has to be grassroots and come from people, and that takes a long time. So there were a bunch of whiffs in 2013 wave of venture capital funded Bitcoin startups because it wasn't ready yet for that use case, and I think there was a misconception. And then ever since then, there's always a better Bitcoin, and those get funded, and I would call it a lot of distractions. But I think do you guys agree with that history and that context?
Yeah, I do. And I mean, I think I said this kind of jokingly, but in that early era, the people that really rocked Bitcoin were the weirdos, right? Like, and again, there's a really interesting paper I've quoted many times. If you haven't read it, who here has read Why the Elite Dismiss Bitcoin? This is like basically the best anthropological piece ever written about Bitcoin. If you haven't read it, like just read it. The gist of it is very, very, very simple. Again, to really grok Bitcoin, there's a lot going on. Some of it is complex. And so you need to be quote unquote smart or like do the work, right? So he has two axes, and one axis is like, how smart are you? Like, how much work have you done if you want to put it in there? The other axis though is how much do you trust the system? And that's a very, very different axis, right? So the people that historically, and I've seen this in my own circles, like I went to a much more sort of like insider school. My friends there still don't get it. They're smart. They're super smart. But they still do not get it to this day.
Is that Yale?
Jail? You were much more likely to grok Bitcoin in jail than you were at Yale.
Somebody so embarrassed to say they went to Yale.
Seriously. Actually, quick funny aside, I have a theory. Highest expected value job of the last 25 years outside of like super hot startups at Google. Highest expected value job.
Vibe coder.
No, I'm going to go with volunteer on the Ron Paul campaign. I'm not even kidding.
Because you bought Bitcoin early.
Yeah, all those fuckers bought Bitcoin because they were young, they got it. But like, how many people took Bitcoin seriously how many people even understood what the Federal Reserve is or what money is? Like the people that were out there, I guess it was '08, like Ron Paul, like these people by most of society standards were nuts and are still nuts. It's like you have everyone else, like think about your daily, you're talking about this stuff and everyone's like, well, should we fund this thing or should we fund that thing? The economy. And then you got this one old guy who's like literally just like shaking his umbrella into the air, being like, we need to go back to the gold standard. And you're like, oh man, these people are not. And then you've got Warren Buffett. And everyone loves Daddy Warren. They got Warren Buffett, David Charlemagne. And they're always sitting there, gold. Gold doesn't throw off any cash, flows or returns. Anyways, and we did a whole show about that last week. I won't rehash it. You should watch it on PBJ. But anyways, the gist of it is, unless you, for some reason, have been outside of the system, maybe you grew up in a country where there's hyperinflation. Wences, why was he the one guy in Silicon Valley that got it? Because he's seen his, savings hyperinflate many times. Maybe, you were whatever, just grew up outside the system, very poor. And he was like, anyways, but if you grew up on the insides work pretty well for you. If you're from the banking class, done well in Silicon Valley, it's like, you don't even think to question, like, is the water that we're in working or is it not? So that's why I think Silicon Valley, didn't get it at first. And to be clear, some did, right? Like some people bought a lot of Bitcoin. Founders Fund bought a lot. Peter Thiel, he has the capability to kind of zoom out and see the guys that short the system, like hedge fund dudes, they understood what was happening. But anyways, and then I think to your point, Steve, you're absolutely right that like then Silicon Valley tried, to pin on it what they knew, which is payments. And it's like, it will happen. I fundamentally believe that. We all fundamentally believe that. We get to zoom out. And to your point, protocols over companies, this is a cathedral. This is a multi-century long project, at least multi-decade long project. And if you don't come in with that view, and you don't come in with a view of the history of the internet and how long that took, then you're going to miss it. So I think Silicon Valley just wasn't prepared. And then those that were have done very well. And then they keep trying to fit the payments narrative on top. And then you see people that make so much money. Like you see the multi-coin fund returning like socket numbers. And you're like, wow, I want some of that, without questioning, well, is this really what I want to dedicate to my life to, dumping on grandma?
Just by options on Intel.
Yeah. Anyways, so that's my more cynical view. I think it's changing. And the last thing I'll say on that, though, is like, I do think Silicon Valley has a very important role to play in all of this. And I think that it's events like this to show people, okay, we're finally at a point where the things you want, payments, we're ready. And now you can fund those companies.
So let's get back to the original question, David. Let me make sure I remember it. Is Silicon Valley missing Bitcoin, or will Bitcoin just grow and thrive? It doesn't have to. Yeah, it's not going to have to grow and thrive through Silicon Valley, but elsewhere in the world.
Yeah, or maybe I'll add a little more color with the context. Is I might make the claim that Silicon Valley has not missed Bitcoin, but Silicon Valley has a very different set of incentives that are not necessarily compatible with Bitcoin. We just think, oh, technology, it must be Silicon Valley. And I think there's some things that Silicon Valley has gotten right about Bitcoin, like probably a dozen venture firms loaded up on Bitcoin, the asset, with their discretionary liquid 20% of the fund. But they didn't invest in a lot of companies. And I think outside of the ones that they did invest, like Coinbase, there aren't a lot of great successes to show monetarily in the venture capital style of investing.
So I think historically that's kind of inarguable. I mean, like how you framed it there is correct historically. So I think the interesting discussion and question is moving forward, will something change? And I think things will change. So I think you're correct that historically buying Bitcoin and holding it, that's been the use case and where you can thrive. There's not been a lot of great startups to fund the past 10 years, especially ones that are focused on Bitcoin. If you're like minting your own tokens and you give those to VCs, that's been incredible returns. I don't think super ethical, but certainly a good VC return. But moving forward, what's transpired? Well, one, Bitcoin as an asset has obviously been tremendously successful the past 10 plus years. There's no doubting that. And everything appears it's going to just continue on that trend. Secondly, the tools to build on Bitcoin are dramatically better today than they have been in the past.
Definitely.
And we've all we've seen that firsthand. Like historically, it's taken several talented developers over a year to build a quality Bitcoin application. Now, people in this room are vibe coding with one-shot vibe coding, and like 9 minutes later, they have a working Bitcoin application, or a working application that integrates Bitcoin payments.
And Matt is not the only one who's done that.
Yeah.
He showed a lot of people how to do it, but he's not the only one.
He gave me the one shot, and then I one shot it, and then it worked.
And if you
I've
want to
heard
one
DK
shot
knows
something,
this too.
talk to Matt.
So, I think that's transformative. So the next 3 years are going to be very different than the last 10 years, and that everyone in this room and millions and millions of people around the world have the ability to create an application, integrate Bitcoin payments into it, and you don't have to be a superstar engineer to do that. So I think we're going to see hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people building millions of applications. A lot of them are going to be toys or kind of junk or learning experiments. That's totally fine. When you have that big of numbers, you only need a small percentage to actually be hits. And even if vibe coding today has its limits, that's totally fine. You can get to an amazing proof of concept. You can even get into production and allow hundreds or thousands of people to use it. So you can even get to product market fit today, single person with a vibe coded product. And then if there is a fit, great. Then you can hire good engineers to make sure it scales and is secure and things like that. So I think that's transformative, and the ability to add Bitcoin payments. We're going to see a lot more of that. And something David's always harped on over time is like Bitcoiners tend to build Bitcoin-centric applications, and then like no one's using it. But I think when you open it up to everyone, a lot of people, including Silicon Valley and big tech, who wouldn't identify as Bitcoiners, they'll build applications that are compelling for other people, and those applications just happen to have Bitcoin integrated into it. No one would call it a Bitcoin-centric application. And once we have that, we're going to have growth, popularity, and then VCs are going to be chomping at the bit to invest.
And the only maybe thing I would push back a little bit, I agree on all of that, is on both of you guys. I think you're right so far with this idea that there haven't been good companies to invest in Bitcoin. Obviously, I'm talking my own book here,
except for the ones you've invested in.
Yeah, exactly. But I will.
You won't say as a VC.
But I will say that the way I think about it is like we've had years now, 5 years, startups, companies like Block that have built a lot of the open source community, a lot of people in this room that have built a tremendous amount of extremely important infrastructure. A lot of that's open source. And you've had companies like Lightning Labs, like Lightspark, that have built this really, really critical Breeze, Alvi, you name it. All these companies that have built all this infrastructure that the vibe coding stuff wouldn't work with if you didn't have the libraries. Lexi's in the room, or they were in the room yesterday. So all these companies, like they've been doing like the super heavy lifting in the shadows. It's kind of like I remember the old sort of like book before everyone hated him, the John Morant commercials. There was always him in the shadows doing the work before you see him going out there and posterizing people. That's the way I see what's happened the last several years of Bitcoin. That infrastructure had to exist before the application. And I think now we're about to enter with vibe coding, all the new tools, the application layer. And yeah, there's going to be tons of those. That's when Silicon Valley's going to get in. But I still think that all of those companies have been building in the dark, also stacking Bitcoin. So they're going to be around forever. That you're going to see some incredible success stories from the infrastructure companies. It just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I just have like a quick question. I used to work in Silicon Valley, and now a Bitcoiner. So I feel like I've gotten a lot of anecdotal evidence of like my basic thesis is that people in Silicon Valley realize they are the biggest beneficiaries of ZIRP.
Truth.
Yeah, whether that's like through first principles or instinctually or something. So they're naturally resistant to Bitcoin, I think, to some degree, because they are the very beneficiaries of the system.
I agree with that. And I don't think it's not like intentional thinking. It's more just like if you were at Google or in Silicon Valley, like life is good. Things are working out well for you. Or if you're a venture capitalist or an entrepreneur, whatever, like here.
That's really close to the money printer.
Yeah.
You're close.
So it's not like, I don't think people in Silicon Valley are like being intentionally evil about that. It's just things are working out. They're smart. They're doing well. And so they don't really carve out much time. I think it's very typical. You're super busy doing your thing. You don't carve out time to consider Bitcoin. Like my own personal story, I learned a bit in 2013, courtesy of Matt and one other person I've worked with at Google. So, bought a little bit, read the white paper, but then I was never negative on Bitcoin, but I definitely, in 2013, I thought it was like this magic internet money, and then it went up and down. And, I just moved on in my life, kept working at Google, doing other stuff, didn't even think about Bitcoin for 4 more years. And then I had left Google in 2015, and in early 2017, so I didn't have a job in early 2017.
Steve
And I
was a professional
That's
athlete.
critical.
Yeah, I was a professional triathlete.
Unsponsored.
And but I had time on my hands. So that time on my hands allowed me to deeply study cryptocurrency at large. And so 2017 is when I really firmly grasped Bitcoin in a way that I hadn't in the past. And I seen that. I don't think I'm unique. I've seen that pattern with people from Silicon Valley who end up having some time to think about this, learning about money, like the history of money, can be much more open to it versus if you're busy building or busy in the Google bubble or building a startup.